What's up, guys? Nukem back here once again, and as you can probably see by all the posters on the wall and the monitor and the Blu-ray player and the Xbox One, it absolutely means one thing, is that I'm finally back into college once again, and I'm actually here to review more movies for you guys. And before I go any further, I want to apologize for you guys because I've been in a 3-week long hiatus because I've been just readjusting things in college, just focusing on schoolwork, moving in, setting up a new set. It's been increasingly long, and I'm trying to get back into the reviewing phase. Now, I actually am. So, with that being said, let's finally start reviewing more movies again. For today's review, we are going to talk about the one, the only, The Predator. In 1987, John McTiernan created the action sci-fi classic known as Predator, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, where a group of soldiers are sent in for a rescue mission only to discover that they are being hunted down by an extraterrestrial warrior known as the Predator, which I personally think is one of the greatest alien movie monsters ever in existence. This movie is not only iconic because of its memorable characters like Blaine, Dutch, Dylan, and even Billy, as well as the numerously awesome one-liners like, "If it bleeds, we can kill it." Or even, "You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed." But because John McTiernan combined all such elements like action, sci-fi, and thriller, and mastered it perfectly as a result. To this day, this movie is not only regarded as one of the greatest action movies in the 1980s, but one of the greatest action movies of all time. And then the franchise expanded a little bit, spawning a sequel in Predator 2, which really wasn't all too good. And then at a point in the early 2000s, we got crossovers with the Aliens franchise in Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which the less said about that movie, the better. However, the franchise didn't go so far south too badly, because after the release of Alien vs. Predator Requiem, Robert Rodriguez finally revitalized the Predator franchise in a movie called Predators, which I thought was pretty good despite the fact that it was just basically a remake or a rerun of the first Predator. Now, after 8 years of waiting, Shane Black, who is also featured in the first Predator movie as a character named Hawkins, who directed the likes of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Iron Man 3, and The Nice Guys, has set out to make the latest Predator franchise known as The Predator, which plays out as a sequel that takes place in the events between the first Predator and Predator 2. However, there was a lot of skepticism from the crowd, from the mediocre trailers that were released by the marketing to the multiple reshoots of having the film readjust the plot and even take out certain characters, one of which happened to be a lifelong friend of Shane Black, but was actually cut out of the movie because of, well, yeah. And because of that, some people are considering this movie to be a film ruined by studio interference. But you know what? I still kept my optimism alive. I was thinking maybe Shane Black will make a great Predator movie. Hopefully Shane Black will make a Predator movie that is as great, if not better, than the first Predator movie. Something like a Blade Runner 2049 situation. Well, that's not the case here, because what we got instead was this year's equivalent of Suicide Squad. Now hear me out, don't get me wrong, this is nowhere near as a disaster of Suicide Squad, but in terms of disappointment, it's right up there with it. The Predator is one of the most disappointing movies I have ever seen in my entire life. In all honesty, everyone, I'm not lying about this at all. When I was watching this movie, I was just in a stupor of pure astonishment because of how much of a letdown this movie actually is. Well, first of all, let's start off by discussing what this gigantic, disjointed heap of a film thinks qualifies as a plot. Boyd Holbrook, who was recently seen in one of the best films of last year, Logan, he plays former Army Ranger Quinn McKenna. He manages to stumble upon the Predator and even his own ship with all of his gadgets, and before both him and the Predator are being taken away by a government agent played by Sterling Kane Brown for his own mysterious motivations, he manages to mail the technology all the way to his house where his son lives, played by Jacob Tremblay. However, when his son discovers the devices, he accidentally activates the equipment, which leads to the summoning of an even bigger Predator to arrive on Earth. And so it's up to Quinn and his team, which consists of a biologist played by Olivia Munn, as well as a group of captives who are played by the likes of Trevante Rhodes, Keegan-Michael Key, to stop the ultimate Predator from wreaking havoc on Earth. Well, I mean, thank goodness for me having having to summarize the entire plot to you guys, because in actuality, this leads to one of my biggest complaints with the movie. From a storytelling perspective, this movie has an identity crisis. This movie has way too many storylines and way too many characters to choose from. This movie basically has the amount of like 3 storylines. I mean, you got one storyline that has to do with Boyd Holbrook and the rest of his gang of loonies. Then you have Sterling K. Brown and his storyline, which has to do with what are the motivations of what the Predator's doing on our Earth. Now, those storylines, they can coincide with each other. They can actually make a very suitable movie. However, those storylines are being interrupted entirely because of the actual storyline that has to do with Jacob Tremblay, where he's an autistic kid and he really misses his father, and he manages to find this alien equipment, which actually triggers the alien to come down on Earth. And this is what I mean when the film has an identity crisis. This movie cannot find a coherent narrative to save its life. Does it want to be an actual legitimate sequel to the first Predator? Does it want to be an homage to Predator movies and to 80s action movies in general? Or does it want to be a father-son bonding movie with Predators? The film tries to do all 3 and fail miserably as a result. The movie is just basically events, and it's not patterns of telling a story. It's just basically like, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Sometimes the film kind of flows properly, but other than that, the movie is just a series of events happening just because the plot says so. And then you have certain storylines in the movie that could possibly work, but instead of trying to expand upon those plot threads, they're just forgotten about, discarded, never mentioned again. Seriously, there are actually parts of the movie where characters just get forgotten about. There are examples where characters just show up in just a few scenes and just immediately get forgotten about. And when that happens, you're just like, what was the point of that character? Why did you need that continuity? What point or purpose does this character have to the film? And speaking of characters, some of the performances are actually pretty good in the movie. The problem is the lack of depth and development that they have. For example, you got Boyd Holbrook. Boyd Holbrook was pretty good in the movie. There was some material that felt like the director was actually given them material to work with. However, not only is he not as good as of a leading man as, say, like Adrian Brody, and he is nowhere near as close as being as good as Arnold Schwarzenegger, the character is just bland and one-dimensional. He's basically an unremarkable action hero that just basically serves as like, you know, the tough guy, military action leading man. And not only that, but his character gets mostly overshadowed by the other cast in the film. Now, the group of captives who are played by the likes of Trevante Rhodes, Keegan-Michael Key, they're pretty good in the movie, and the chemistry and banter between each other is 100% there. However, there's a catch. These characters who are being taken captive are all the same character. Aside from a few minor adjustments to some character traits, they're basically interchangeable between each other. They do nothing throughout the whole movie but just to act crazy and spouting jokes and one-liners. And the biggest thing is that when they're facing off against the Predator, they're not even the least bit scared. Now, here's what I want to tell you about. Before I watched The Predator, I watched the original, and one of the things that are really good about the characters in the movie is not only because they're saying amazing one-liners, is because these characters felt like characters. They felt like people in a situation. These soldiers, while they're being hunted down by the Predator, they're scared out of their minds. They're terrified. And you feel tension because you feel like at any moment these characters could die, and you don't want that to happen to them. Here in this movie, every single character just plays the wild card. They do crazy, ridiculous things and say crazy, ridiculous lines, only just to get a cheap laugh out of the audience, and you mainly don't care about when they live or die because their characters are that shallow and forgettable. Olivia Munn is in the movie, and not only is she entirely miscasted in this, but she's mainly there just to spout out exposition. She's basically there to pick up a substance or to find multiple documents and to literally explain the entire history or the motivation of the Predators, and that's pretty much it. Also, she suffers in the movie because her character barely gets an introduction. She just randomly shows up and gets taken away by a government agent just to get to a secret underground military headquarters. And you're just like, who are you? Why should I care about your character? What is going on? However, you also have a good actor in Sterling K. Brown, which I do think he is good in a lot of material that he's given in. However, in this movie, he's basically there just to play a generic government agent that is overacting the heck out of this movie. His character is such a cartoon character that not only can you not take him seriously, but because it feels like he just doesn't gel well with the rest of the movie. And then we get Jacob Tremblay, which is a very good child actor. I mean, I've seen him all over the place, and no matter what he's in, whether it's an Oscar-nominated movie or a giant heap of trash, he's very good. However, what really brings him down is the material he's given, which is terrible. In this movie, he basically plays a kid who's basically being bullied mostly because of his autism, which I can find sympathetic, but the thing about that is that I have two problems with his character. One of which is that his character is filled with nothing but cliches of gifted children, precocious kids, and autism. One of the examples is having him fix not one, not two, but 3 entire chess games. It is easily one of those things that you could possibly see out of movies like, I don't know, The Book of Henry, where you have like precocious kids doing specific things. But not only that, my second problem with this character is that his autism serves as a plot device. A plot device. They basically kind of use it as like a MacGuffin to drive the plot forward, and it did not pull off in any way. Now, this is coming from a guy who really likes Shane Black. I like a whole lot of his work, and personally, one of the greatest things about him is that he has the ability to write very quotable lines. He writes very sharp and witty dialogue. However, the dialogue in this movie is poorly written. They are filled with exposition just to explain the plot or to explain a certain substance or even motivations of certain characters. There are also crowbarred in sections where they have to reference the original, which is just embarrassing and insulting. They use, of course, Get to the Chopper, but they also use You're one ugly mother effer, and every time there was a reference being delivered, I cringed, because apparently the writers were like, well, we can't have a Predator movie without those classic lines. And the jokes that Shane Black would usually do great on with movies like The Nice Guys or Iron Man 3 or Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, in this movie, they're not that funny in the least. So much so that some of the jokes in this movie could be straight up offensive. Like Michael Bay offensive. Another thing that this movie really promised to us was the amounts of violence we're gonna get. Like, it was gonna be the most violent, gory Predator movie that we have ever seen. Well, they do have one thing correct. The violence is gory. Because other than that, the action scenes in this movie are underwhelming as hell. And the vast majority of the action scenes are ruined by 3 things. Number 1, the editing. When it comes to the editing, in every single other action scene, when the film is trying to focus on an action scene or someone getting stabbed by the Predator, it's just quick cuts, quick cuts, quick cuts. Number 2, its lack of tension and that it barely has enough time to breathe. There is always action coming in, and because of that, the characters can barely even have time to develop. Because you don't have that, the film lacks suspense, it lacks tension, because you don't care if the characters are gonna live or die, that they're basically just cannon fodder, or they're basically killed in a blink or you'll miss it scene. Seriously, there is one scene where a character dies, and I had no idea how he actually died. It was too quickly edited that I couldn't even register how that character died. And finally, the gore in this movie is CGI'd. Sure, there are some cool, imaginative death scenes, and there were some practical gore effects that I kinda like, but throughout all these action scenes, it is nothing more but CGI blood. Like pretty much something out of the Expendables. And speaking of the CGI, the Predators are finally back in this movie. And you know what? I have to give the movie this. It was really nice just to see the old classic Predator once again. Because, I don't know, we haven't seen him since the 2010 movie with Adrian Brody. So it was pretty nice to see him in costume. However, there was another Predator, and he is CGI'd, and he looks awful. At some points, he actually looks pretty good. At other points, he looks very bad. And that goes the same with the Predator dogs in the movie. Not only do they look really bad and easily noticeable, but after a few scenes later, they are immediately transformed into cute little house pets that are there to help the good guys. Because that's apparently what we really need, more comic relief. And before anything of what I said can get possibly worse, the ending. That ending is atrocious sequel bait. Was it as bad of an ending as Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom? I don't know, but it could be. Now, it may sound like I am really trashing this movie, and I am to some extent. But the thing is that I really do see the potential in this movie. I could see some of the characters being easily relatable. I can see the Predator being cool and badass. I can see some of the action scenes just blowing us away. I could see the movie giving us very charming characters with quotable lines. However, by the end of it, that unfortunately didn't happen, because what we really got here is a film ruined by studio interference. The Predator is a massive, massive letdown. While there is some moments of potential that I really liked, and it was nice to see the Predator back once again, and some performances and camaraderie really did give me a smile on my face, the story is totally confused, disjointed, and all over the place. The characters lack any kind of depth and dimension to them. The dialogue is poorly written, and the jokes are incredibly unfunny. The action and gore is underwhelming, the editing is choppy, the CGI is appallingly noticeable, and the ending of this movie can't leave you more dissatisfied. And with that as a result, I have to give The Predator a 1 out of 5. Alright guys, so that is my review of The Predator. Comment below, let me know what you thought about the movie. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And also, if you would like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Luke Nukem, and Shane Black, 20th Century Fox, I am sorely disappointed in you.